it's on their speakers.
If you narrowed it down.
No, no, that's actually good because that helps the audio in the room.
Well, I think all five would still be in contention, depending on what happens. We don't know what's going to happen.
You get feedback with all of them on, Pat. You
Are
can't,
you confident that this?
we turn them
one,
off and on because
not
you
the
get,
next one after the
you get
election, you're
feedback.
gonna make a decision?
Yeah, excuse me?
Is that on now?
You really, you know, I mean,
You're streaming it?
No one's
it's still.
watching.
Test, 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 test,
We're curious. people.
test. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll call for approval of the agenda. Is there any changes to the agenda?
Yeah, Tom, I'd like to add a discussion on the purchase of the smart mesh cover for the pool. Beach Club, as recommended by the Aquatics Committee.
Any objection?
Yeah, just
Discussion? Discussion, okay. Okay, I'll call for approval. Any other changes?
Yeah, I had a motion for removal of a committee member.
Okay, I'll put that after HR. Motion, removal. Any objection?
I'd like to know why Mr. Hill has not shared this motion in advance of this meeting with the board. I suggest this be deferred for a later time so that each of us individually have time to consider the action.
And I second, I do not support this at this time.
Okay, all in favor of having it added to the agenda, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Any other changes? Okay, all in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye. Public comments? Mr. Reynolds? Just to correct you, there was a closed session that went into open session, and during the open portion of that closed session, when we went into open, we had discussions, food and beverage, HR. It was not done in a closed session.
Mr. Reynolds, I'd like to comment on what you just brought up. And in the beginning of what you said the board agreed to put out an RFP for food and beverage. That happens not to be the case, actually. The board discussed issues with food and beverage and had taken a vote on a course of action. It did not include the action that has been taken. And I'm assuming that there will be more discussion about this when we get to that item on the agenda.
Thank you for that explanation. And again, in addition to going into open session after a closed session, that adds to the issue of lack of transparency. Very good point.
Director Herrick, may I comment?
Here on the issue of transparency.
Director Herrick, may I add a comment?
Yes.
In reference to Mr. Reynolds, if I recall, at the last regular board meeting, I was actually one of the directors that recapped the outcome of the open session that took place on June 19th, at which I have informed the membership of the discussion that the board did with regard to food and beverage issues. So it was done, I believe, on June 23rd, Friday morning, in an open session, repeated again the discussion that took place on June 19th in the open session at 9 p.m. Monday evening. But I do take your comment very, very seriously, and I'm sure it will be addressed when this topic is on the agenda today, as far as the RFP goes and how this is going to play out going forward. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, Mr. Hill, food and beverage consultant.
Even though this is with an operational agreement and is within the realm of the general manager for authorization, I'm bringing to the board my recommendation of Synergy Restaurant Consultants as a recommendation for a food and beverage consultant to do an operational assessment of our food and beverage operations at the Mumford's Landing facility, Beach Club facility, Turns Grill, and Swim and Racket Club. On June 23rd, I issued a very brief RFP that went out to 7 companies. That was Profit Line, Gilkey Restaurant Consultants, Synergy Restaurant Consultants, Restaurant Consultant, Barmetrics, TRG Restaurant Consulting, and Bear Management Group. We received proposals from 3 of those. That was Profit Line, Gilkey Restaurant Consultants, and Synergy. Restaurant Consultant and TRG Restaurant Consulting did not respond. Barmetrics did not have enough time. They have a local office in Annapolis, but they didn't have a resource available to work with Ocean Pines in the near future. And Bear Management Group declined to bid, citing they believe they had already provided the information that we were requesting in this RFP to Bill Rackow and Tom Olson several years ago, and that should we be interested in a real estate lease, they would be interested in engaging with us, but that would be the extent of any further conversation with them.
Would you repeat the 7 companies again, please?
The 7 companies are Profit Line, Gilkey Restaurant Consultants, Synergy Restaurant Consultants, Restaurant Consultant, Barmetrics, Bear Management Group, and TRG Restaurant Consulting. The motion was to accept the Synergy Restaurant Consultants proposal.
Any discussion? Ms. Jacobs?
Did you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
As I mentioned in my comment to Mr. Reynolds, this is not what the board had agreed to when we discussed this issue. This is recent information that just came to us. This is action that was taken unilaterally by the interim GM. The company that is being recommended is on the West Coast. I don't know why we need to go to the West Coast and pay the costs associated with bringing someone like that in. We have all received many emails about problems that have arisen with our food and beverage operations at several locations. They need to be addressed. We were all in agreement that they needed to be addressed. This is not the route that we expected. This was new information that was put on us. And in fact, when Mr. Hill says that it's within his operational purview, in fact, we had reached an agreement that these kinds of actions would not be taken going forward until we had a new general manager in place. This is contrary to what we have agreed to in the past. I am totally against it. We certainly are in favor of getting some help in this regard. One of the things that I would suggest is that we bring Linda Huetner back ASAP. We had one venue that was profitable for Ocean Pines. We don't anymore. That's because she felt the need to leave the Ocean Pines employment. I am not in favor of what the interim general manager has proposed, but we definitely do need some help with regard to the food and beverage. I'm not really sure any longer who's making the decisions about what's occurring. Are people taking direction from the GM who has no experience in the food and beverage arena, or are people being allowed to make decisions on their own? That's an open question for me.
To respond to Ms. Jacobs' request, and I guess to be specific, since the conversation took place on the 19th, specifically, the board, one of the board members instructed me to hire an individual as a consultant who is a resident of Ocean Pines, who has previously applied for employment and was not deemed to meet the credentials. And having that individual as a consultant without any kind of comparison or evaluation to other options is not doing my job as the general manager. So I responded by putting out a request to organizations that met the qualifications to fulfill the services requested of evaluating our operations, finding deficiencies and seeking areas of improvement. And I did what I would do for any other purchase as the acting general manager in finding competitive options that provided the best value to the association.
Thank you, Director Herrick. I'd like to respond on a couple of things that Mr. Hill brought up. First of all, his statement that a director instructed him to hire a local consultant is a fabrication of far-fetched truth. And certainly there are written emails that can illustrate that such has never taken place. When he was challenged on a decision not to consider the local consultant, he invented, self-created a policy which I asked him to produce, and that was never actually done. I can't imagine that a consultant would not be considered for assignment based on his application for a job last year when we were searching for the executive chef. I find such policy, if it does exist, probably hilarious or ridiculous or whatever other language you want to use to describe such policy. What the board asked for and what was agreed is to take immediate actions to get the food and beverage situation under control. I don't want to get calls from people complaining about the beach club, stating that they almost ran out of food a week ago, and all the other craziness that's going on. I'm totally in favor of what Director Jacobs stated, and this has been already brought up to us before as an idea. We need to get experienced people like Linda Beck to get a handle on the situation. We need a local consultant who can step up. I already provided Mr. Hill with information of a company that's right here in Berlin that does this kind of things as well. But the fact remains that quick fixes need to be found, and there are members in the community that have told me they have made offers to help, which have been consistently and regularly declined unilaterally, and now we as a board are faced with having to deal with this operational issue. Frankly, I'm really not happy because I don't want the board to be accused that we are getting involved in the operational matters, but it appears that for the last couple of months that was a necessity. I would like to go back to what we have agreed to do as a board, which is to find somebody locally that can step in, find quick fixes to the obvious problems, and let's get the situation under control so we can have a decent summer season with only a few weeks left.
Well, I do want to read from the minutes that you yourself have provided from the Monday, June 19th special meeting in regards to the H&R, in regards to the food and beverage. And in your own words, you said some directors shared their own personal experiences. The board decided to bring an industry consultant as soon as possible to assist management with operational improvements to ensure the best experience for our guests in the coming months. That was a directive to the acting general manager to bring in an industry consultant as soon as possible. He went out and solicited bids. Now, you may not be happy with who he picked, but you directed him to do so, and that's what he did. If you as a board decide that that's not enough, or it's not close enough, or you need someone local now, and it has to be only local, then we can direct the board to find someone local. But to bring in someone who lives in the community to direct us on how we should do our food and beverage, I would much rather have a professional company come in here that is an industry consultant, not one man or one association member's opinion on how we should run our food and beverage operations. So, I mean, if it's the problem that he brought people in and they're not local enough, well, then let's direct them to bring in some local people and professional that can give us the independent advice that we need to assist the community in moving forward with food and beverage.
I totally agree with the concept of a consultant for the yacht club and maybe our other food and beverage venues. And if it is in the purview of the board, I guess we could discuss, is this a board or management decision? Today, it's in the board's hands to vote. And while I totally support the concept, I don't feel comfortable enough about any one of the three vendors that have made it to the final, I guess, selection to vote for any of those. And in particular, I too feel that a West Coast firm may not be the best solution for our yacht club or turn grill. I think we may be able to go more locally. And I too support the idea of a firm that is established and does this rather than a community member that's offering to help. That may be fine, but I think for myself, I would feel an obligation to the community to be sure that I was bringing in a qualified company to help us in this most important review.
Doug?
Yeah, kind of agreeing with Pat's approach that, yeah, we do need to bring in, industry experts, subject matter experts in order to address this. I think the locality of reference is important to try to keep the cost down. Clearly, if we're bringing somebody in from as far away as the West Coast, I would think that we'd want to make sure that their credentials and their ability to effectively solve our problems is certainly guaranteed. With regard to, our acting GM said there was a list of criteria for the RFP. I don't have that, if you can direct me where that list of criteria is, because in case we have to send this RFP out to someone local, I'd like to know what list of criteria that we're working from, so we can make sure that when we do the analysis, we're comparing what the what the respondent to the RFP is offering and our requirements. So I just want to make sure that we have that information. I do not have that information, so if you could direct me to where that is, I'd appreciate that.
I have one additional question and comment. I'd like to know why this RFP was not posted on our website. And I'd like to know whether he has reached out to the company that's here in Berlin that specializes in this service, and if they were given the opportunity to respond to the RFP, or was this by invitation only RFP with no solicitation, no publication of the RFP?
Given the short turnaround, it was sent out the weekend following our board meeting on the 23rd to the 7 parties that I noted there, and I asked for a turnaround within 6 business days, which is why it went where it did.
And how did you come up with a list of 7?
I took your cue and did a Google search of the companies that came up first that had the relevant experience, and that's who it went to.
And the local company didn't come up in the Google search?
No.
And why wasn't the RFP put on our website?
Because of the timeline for turnaround. And it was the dollar amount doesn't exceed anything, or it falls into any, I needed to get 3 prices. I didn't have to put out an RFP. I did what I had to do to fulfill the request that you asked for.
Our bylaws state open procurement procedures. What's so strange about open that needs to be explained?
Well, you told me to hire 1 individual, so how open's that, Slobodan?
I will produce the email on this subject to the media after the meeting so they can determine whether that is true or not.
And I'll give them the rest of your emails that show where you're directing President Herrick to tell me to hire an individual. If you want to play, let's play.
Ms. Jacobs?
My recollection is that we had agreement about a particular individual that had been suggested to provide assistance in the food and beverage arena. When the interim GM chose to discount that person as qualified, what should have occurred, in my opinion, is that he came back to the board and the board would have discussed this matter about what would be the appropriate next course of action to take. That's not getting into operational issues. That's called board oversight.
Any further? Dave, yes.
It doesn't like, oh, that, wrong one. Yeah, this recollection, my memory, going back to something like the 19th, and given the range of things that we discussed, is failed. So I believe that Tom read what actually happened, and that was posted in the minutes. I believe, given that direction, that the general manager followed the correct procedures. Now, I question myself whether or not 3 companies who turned out to be the best on the West Coast really is a thorough enough search for the appropriate party. And I also will question whether or not we should not have made a more detailed search, even given the time frame, for somebody local to meet the requirement. However, given that was said, all of the rest of it, and it's already been exhibited here, follows our procedure and falls within the realm of authority of the interim general manager. And certainly, the sidebars on whether or not an individual employee who resigned ought to be hired back or not hired back is totally irrelevant to what the subject of this discussion is, which is the hiring of an industry consultant. Now, I think this board can instruct the general manager to basically restart the search with a focus on local companies, and that'll pretty much end of it. Give them a time frame too, and that would include the company that Slobodan suggested, who I don't know any of them, but that's what they do, and just put an end to it. If we don't accept the West Coast company, and I think we probably won't, then just restart.
Ms. Jacobs?
With all due respect, Mr. Stevens, I don't see how you could possibly say that what I suggested about rehiring Ms. Hutner is not related to this topic when the whole topic is about our effectiveness in the food and beverage arena.
The topic is an industry consultant, an outside consultant who can take a independent, objective view of our operations. That's the topic, not a particular person. That person may be part of that industry consultant's consideration. Certainly could be. They'll have the history, they'll have the knowledge that we present to them, and they'll be able to make up their mind. But we want their recommendation, not your recommendation, not my recommendation, and not somebody off the street's recommendation. That's the whole point of doing this, and that's why I voted for it.
With regard to industry experts, and I'll formulate this in form of a question, would it be beneficial, and I'm just looking for board opinion from my colleagues, would it be beneficial to include in the list of industry experts local proprietors with successful restaurant businesses as a potential resource for providing us some guidance? Just a question.
I believe when Mr. Hill took over as general manager, he did bring in some consultants from the local industry restaurants for advice, exactly what you said. I think we need to move a little bit forward. In my opinion, we need to have a professional consultant team come in.
I think the problem, and we've done that before, and I can almost name the people who were brought in. And now this is going back 5 years, 6 years. And the difficulty is that you get into great conversations and you get some good opinions and ideas, but it's not structure. And so you don't, at the end of the day, have a specific idea or any specific ideas of what to do next. It just works that way.
Yeah, Dave, in response, point well taken. I just wanted to say, publicly state that if anyone was thinking in terms of using, a local restaurateur or proprietor, that we've publicly stated that, yes, there might have been some benefit, but Dave, I would agree with you. If we go to a formal industry expert, we'll get a very structured deliverable based on the contract. So, thank you.
Ms. Jacobs?
What started this process was that we all were in agreement we needed a quick fix to our food and beverage situation. One of the ways that was discussed to try to make that happen was the suggestion of a local person who has the background, who might have been able to help us quickly. We've now gone in a different direction, but my suggestion of hiring Linda Hutner back is a quick fix to solving some of the problems that we're experiencing at the Beach Club. Those problems didn't exist in the past, and so it is completely appropriate for me to have suggested that, since the genesis of this whole problem was to find a quick fix.
Just to add to what Director Jacobs stated, and I did find the email that I sent to all directors right after our meeting. What was agreed in a meeting is exactly what Director Jacobs said. We wanted to see if there was anybody available locally with the expertise. I have brought to your attention that a person is available, and I have passed on the information, including the resume, to the board and to Director Hill. Never has the board discussed, or has Director Hill told the board that what he wants to do is RFP process. There was an issue with time, with the urgency, with a quick delivery, with quick fixes to what were obviously problems with our food and beverage operations. This was never to be what it's turning out to be, and it's not that the board is against it, but had we known that at that time, different course of action would have taken. And as far as this motion and Mr. Hill's recommendation, as it stands right now, I would not vote in favor of it, because I would prefer that if we want a consultant, whether it's an independent consultant or a company, the best approach is to find somebody locally that can start immediately and address the obvious issues that we have.
Can we agree that we want to bring in an industry consultant professional from the local area? Is that what we're directing the GM to do? Can we agree on that?
First.
Well,
We should vote on a motion first, his recommendation to award a contract to a California company, and then let's move on to the next step.
okay, I'll agree to that. Any other discussion on the motion that's on the table? All in favor of the recommendation of the general manager bringing in Synergy as an industry consultant to help us with the food and beverage, say aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Discussion on HR issues.
Thank you, Director Herrick. One of the other things that was discussed in the open session on June 19th that I have also summarized on June 23rd, which is the regular board meeting that took place Friday morning, is that the board understood there are certain issues related to personnel matters and the working environment within the association. At that time, the board decided that the best way to address this is to immediately hire an on-site local consultant with the HR expertise. That was decided on June 19th and reinforced in the open meeting on June 23rd. We are now in a situation where acting general manager has taken unilateral actions to extend this HR services to our existing law firm, our legal counsel, which I find to be a new service that appears to be sole sourced. And it's not in line with what the board asked that it be done. Therefore, I have a motion that you have been shared with several days ago, which I'm prepared to read and to call for a vote on exactly what the board agreed to do several weeks ago. If there are no comments, I will be happy to read the motion, background and a discussion and open it, if it's seconded, then be open for a discussion.
Point of order, are we going to have the motion before the discussion or discussion before the motion? That's question. There are those of us that are far more knowledgeable.
I think the discussion can take place at either time, after the motion, if it's seconded, or now, whatever.
Motion should be made and seconded, then you have discussion.
Okay, would you like me to read the motion? Okay. All right. I motion that the board approves immediate hiring of a local HR consultant as a temporary on-site resource to the association's management and staff until such time when the new general manager is on board and able to make a more permanent HR decisions. Background. At the special meeting on June 19th, the board reviewed several personnel issues concerning the work environment that came to the board's attention. Discussion. I recommend that the board approves the hiring of an independent local HR consultant immediately. I recommend this consultant reports directly to the finance director. I further recommend the role of this consultant to be the following: available to employees to discuss personnel matters in confidentiality, review new employee handbook and provide feedback, review certain personnel decisions to ensure compliance with the association's policies and procedures, and 4, help develop and deliver training to the department heads and to the employees related to the new employee handbook and its impact on the employees and the working environment going forward.
I'll second for purposes of discussion only.
Discussion. Pat?
As I recall from that session, I think what I recall, rather, from that session is that we agreed to hiring an interim HR professional to be on site. However, that was based on that individual passing muster with our law firm that we currently use for HR issues. I don't remember ever saying hire this particular person without any vetting. I would be very, I've looked at the resume and there's experience, but I would not be comfortable saying put this person on site, making our HR decisions, which at this time of some uncertainty and a little upheaval and angst on the part of many employees, maybe having the proper HR information, a proper HR representative for us, whether it's an attorney or someone we hire interim, is extremely important. I am not comfortable. And maybe that night felt a little more comfortable. In retrospect, I am not comfortable hiring this person on site to say, okay, they're going to be handling our HR issues. I also thought that I remembered from that evening that until things happened with an HR person on site, we were definitely going to use our current law firm for any HR matter.
Tom?
Dave?
Yeah, if I may just, adding to Pat's remarks. First of all, as far as our law firm goes, there's been the suggestion that all of a sudden we're doing something new with them. That's not my recollection. My recollection was we hired Lurch Early way back when, specifically because one of the reasons was because of their expertise in the HR area. Basically, in addition to other types of law issues that we have, they would be able to provide us that expertise on call. That's my recollection of why they're there right now. It's their purpose. My recollection of the meeting is similar to Pat's. We agreed that we had two kind of HR issues. We believed that Lurch Early would be able to steer us properly in the right direction when it came to the legal issues that come up in HR, and they do come up. I mean, and you do need attorney support in that area. On the other hand, though, we also, I think, all generally agreed that we needed somebody that employees could get to on at least an interim basis, if not permanently, who they could talk to and on site. without a lot of difficulty. And we all agreed to that. Nobody agreed, as I think Pat says, and I would be extremely uncomfortable with just pulling somebody in without some reasonable vetting. And she's correct, without a conversation between what, we have two aspects, somebody on site who's sort of a consultant, who's somebody that our employees can talk to, and a law firm to handle the legal issues. Those people have to work together. I mean, because the issues can get intermingled. So there was no question in my mind that that's what we were, or where we were trying to go. Now, what happened was that the law firm recommended Neary, who is the HR person, that he could be made available on a part-time basis. Come in, be available either immediately through phone or could be available face-to-face, sitting in our offices for employees to be able to address their issues and their problems with. That's not the same as hiring a consultant or a person, different person to come in. But it's certainly in the near term, and with our going into hiring a new general manager, it's certainly a good interim solution. I had no problem at all with that. And I really can't understand why anybody would.
Dave, Pat, I acted as on the same recollection you have from that meeting. And in fact, Lurch Early's had a representative on site twice since that meeting. And will, at this point, are scheduled to be back the week of the 17th again. They have fulfilled the request to be on site. And specific to Director Trendick's motion, we already paid Lurch Early to vet our handbook. Lurch Early is already scheduled to do the training on the handbook because they wrote it and they understand it best. So I'm dumbfounded as to why we would pay someone else to go through the same handbook when we had a firm that we as a board agreed to back in September to take on these issues and these matters. This is nothing new, and we're following a course that was already in place. And the handbook has been something that's been going on for 4 months now and had the input of all of the senior staff involved with personnel. Further, the law firm is held to an even stronger code of ethics regarding handling these matters, which at this point in time, I believe is extremely important. And until another GM comes in, they are a very strong solution for us. If you're telling me to hire someone else, the first thing the board needs to do is figure out what that person's supposed to do, create a job description, and our bylaws do not designate any separation of HR. The HR capacities fall within the GM's office. The GM is the chief administrative officer that is responsible for employment. The board creates job descriptions, but the GM has the authority of hiring and firing is the ultimate point of command there. If there's some different desire, the board needs to describe that. You can't just say hire someone and not dictate what to do, and that's what Lurch Early came back with. Tom has relayed that concern back, and if you want to have a real conversation, have a conversation about creating a job description.
Yeah, I agree. The board's to establish a new position, provide the salary approval and job description, outlining the role and responsibility of position that this position will entail. And we have reps from the law firm that are meeting with the staff. They're available on email, they're available on phone, they're on site when needed, and they can work with the board and the incoming GM to craft a permanent solution for the community going forward. The board is to create the position, outline what the position does, and it's up to the general manager, the responsibility of the GM to make that hire. The board sets what they want the GM, and that what the position should be. The GM has the right to bring this, I don't understand this motion whatsoever. Doug?
Tom, I agree in concept with what you just said, except we're talking about a consultant position, not a permanent position at this point. We agreed to bring in a consultant temporarily to address any open issues with the intent of having that as a temporary position and making sure that when the new GM comes in, he or she will be tasked with assessing what the HR needs will be and then creating that job description as is required. I would agree with you, and then moving forward permanently. I sent a message to every one of you back on the 3rd about how much is this costing the association and how long we will have this arrangement with NERI in place. Not with the intent of saying it's wrong, I'm just curious to know how much it is costing us right now to do that. Because quite frankly, I don't mean to have the question sound negative, it may behoove us to say, because the rate right now is X, we can keep NERI as the temporary solution, again, in doing a compare and contrast. If it's so exorbitant that we need to look at another alternative, because assuming a new GM would be at least 45 to 60 days out, then we could look at what it would cost the association to have a temporary consultant position in place for that time and to address any particular funding issues that may come up.
Dave?
I just want to point out, Doug, that NERI is a consultant, and in a consultant position. He's our attorney, or works for our attorney. He's a consultant, and he is temporary. I mean, this is not a permanent thing. But on the other hand, it is a fix that allows a new GM to walk in, have something in place, something very solid and connected to our legal issues. Just one third thing. If we hire somebody independent, I don't know who that person would be, we'd have to figure that out for sure. But we hire somebody in, independent of the law firm, then we're still going to have communications between our law firm and that person. And that only adds, I think, it adds to the level of difficulty in resolving problems quickly.
Ms. Jacobs?
Mr. Reynolds has criticized this board for not being transparent, and so let's be honest and talk about why we are in this position right now. I'm not going to be quiet about this anymore because there is a write-up full of lies in the progress that was delivered to my driveway today, and I am not going to put up with this any longer. The reason that we came to an agreement that we needed somebody on site was because employees are coming to me with complaints because we didn't have an HR person. And you all are aware of that. I forwarded that complaint to the attorney. Now, let's talk about how we got that attorney to be our employment representative. That was delivered in an email to us after a meeting that Tom, Brett, and I believe Dave had, where we were informed that that person was now going to be our HR contact. Yes, in the past, these matters have been handled by the GM. You all, in the past boards, never saw fit to take that responsibility and divide it out. But we are in a different situation now within our interim GM, who has created all kinds of chaos as it relates to employment. And I am no longer going to be silent about this and have my name defamed. At no time have I ever gone to any employee directly. Employees keep coming to me. And why does that happen? Because they understand that I will keep their confidences. I have never revealed, I've never breached anyone's confidence about the matters that have been brought to me. I have done what is required of me. It had been passed on to the HR person that we were told was our HR person. Not that we ever agreed on that, voted on that, had any RFP about that. I am not going to be silent about this anymore.
No, I got something to say. The more serious issue here is repeated efforts by certain directors, 1 and 2 directors, that constantly go to employees with HR issues to facilitate without, unilaterally on their own, without any board knowledge whatsoever. We had 2 directors go to one of our directors that resigned to do on their own an exit interview without telling the board anything about it to get information from that particular person. Unilaterally, with no board knowledge whatsoever. We additionally had another supposed statement, which was undated and unsigned, given to Ms. Jacobs, who turned it over to an attorney, an HR complaint, and we still don't know what happened in that and how she got that complaint. If it is a complaint, it wasn't even signed or dated, but it's a statement. The board had no idea that this was going on until a closed session that she said to me, oh, did you get an HR complaint? And I said, no, I didn't get an HR complaint. Well, you will. The board still doesn't know her involvement in that. And now I get a phone call from one of our senior staff members that basically she's asking and soliciting a complaint against one of the candidates running for board as a candidate. And she says, contact me on a private phone because she knows it's immoral what she's doing and not on an OPA phone. And she's working with other people. This is a conspiracy to affect the election. And I have to tell you, it's reprehensible what's going on. This is 3 instances that the board does not even know about, and you're soliciting complaints. Where do you get off being an HR consultant for Ocean Pines and taking it upon yourself to do this without any board knowledge whatsoever?
How
It's
dare you
reprehensible.
accuse me
This is-
without the facts? And if I came
wa-
out in
it's
public
direct-
with the
it's
facts,
direct-
that
it's-
particular candidate would be very embarrassed, let me tell you. The only thing I have ever done is keep the confidence of employees who felt uncomfortable going in any other direction. And because I'm an attorney, and because they knew that they could come to me in confidence and it would not be breached, that's what happened. That's because of the situation that we have found ourselves in, thanks to Mr. Hill. And I am not going to be defamed by you, by Mr. Staus, Mr. Hill, or anybody else, because I have done nothing other than try to be helpful to employees who find themselves in this predicament. I have not gone to anybody. I didn't go to Mary Bozak. Mary Bozak came to us. Mary Bozak came to us because she went to other directors and felt her complaints fell on deaf ears. So much to the point that she then felt she had no recourse but to resign. So don't you dare accuse me of anything wrongdoing. I have done nothing wrong.
Let me tell you something, that's another untruth, because I did
That is
5
not untrue.
I did 5, I met with Mary.
Director Herrick, I
and
request
did
the floor.
And I did 5 specific actions to help Ms. Bosak. So for you to say that I did absolutely nothing, that is a complete false
not
and a
what I
lie.
said.
Yes, you said I did nothing.
No, that's not what I said.
5
Listen
different
to
things
me.
that we talked about was done for Mary Bosak, okay? Now, this thing that you think that you could just do HR complaints on your own and not even tell the board, no, that's wrong. I'm sorry.
I
You have
did
no right
nothing
to
on
do
my
that.
own, but do exactly what the
What did-
procedure
what-
was.
what's the
I
procedure,
passed
that
it
you're gonna
on
do an
to an
exit
attorney.
interview?
Time out.
Let me ask you-
I request the floor, Director Herrick.
I'm talking right now. No, you don't have,
But you can't unilaterally just take over every time.
I'm answering.
He is the president. He has the floor.
First of all, you did an exit interview on your own and never told any board director. You think that's proper? No, I don't think it's proper. You take a statement and keep it in your pocket, no date, not assigned, and you keep it, and you don't report it right away. Maybe because what happened didn't pan out the way you wanted it with the first complaint you took, and now you hold it on this one. We don't know the reasons, but you didn't hand in that complaint as soon as you got it. The attorney told us that. You admitted to the attorney you did not hand in that
Because I
complaint right
went
away.
on a cruise, pardon me. I told the person, I can't deal with this until I come back, because they wanted me to deal with it. And I left to go on a cruise immediately thereafter. I didn't sit on anything, so don't you dare accuse me of something
only-
that's false.
I'm telling you what the attorney told us. He's the one that got the complaint, and he said that you said you didn't hand it in right away. I'm only repeating what he gave us, the information he gave us, okay?
Tom, point of order.
Yes, thank
Yeah, we can't have a back and forth debate between 2 members. You
Okay.
gotta go, you got it, then somebody raises their hand, and they got it, and they got it. So,
Fine.
Have a floor, please.
Go ahead.
This is a board in crisis. And the crisis was created by one single person's actions. And I think everybody knows who that person is. 2 months ago, some of us tried to take actions to prevent from bad situation getting worse. Those who tried to do that were portrayed as self-serving, with vendettas in mind. And now we're witnessing this today, which actually reflects negatively on every one of us sitting at this table. And I think the association has a right to question what is going on and who did they elect. I wouldn't be surprised if they ask us all to march out of the room, because the professionalism that's being displayed here is very, very disappointing. Emotions can take over, personal attacks. It doesn't help anybody. I think what we need to do is step back and realize that what we are trying to do is what's in the best interest of the association, not to protect the reputation of some. We need to stop this. It's got to stop. Otherwise, it's really going to get worse. Now, let's face it. Back to the motion. This whole motion is about responding to the employees' needs for on-site support. If I was working for this association, do you think I would want to pick up a phone and talk to a lawyer in Bethesda about an issue I have with the acting GM? No, I would not. So why would anybody else in this association want to do the same? My motion, with the same desire 3 weeks ago, was designed to basically provide a fundamental assistance to a staff that has concerns as a result of Brett Hill's management style that has been witnessed over recent months. Now, you can say we have a legal firm that can provide this assistance, but let's face it, legal firm providing HR assistance has to do very often with labor laws, whether they're federal, state, or otherwise. I am talking providing on-site support by an HR, seasoned, experienced person that deals with other matters besides just legal. 2 people came forward offering their services at the very, very reasonable scenarios. Those 2 people were turned over to legal firm in Bethesda for interviews. We never heard back what happened. All we heard is, Lurch is going to take over, and here's the lawyer that's assigned to be on site and do X, Y, Z. Oh, by the way, they're the ones that designed the new employee handbook, which, by the way, doesn't have anything about video surveillance policy. That's been going on here. And now they're the one that are actually going to do this handbook and do the training, and we have a surveillance going on without any written policy in place. Let's stop this nonsense. Director Jacobs is correct. Anybody that has approached me, it's been initiated by those people. If anybody says otherwise, bring them here, and I will confront them in front of everybody, in public, if anybody thinks otherwise. However, let's also be transparent. The person that's brought this forward, related to Director Jacobs, is the same person that got a $20,000 raise from Mr. Hill and been promoted to a position that I'm being told is totally unqualified for. So, like I said, we have a chaos going on at the operational level that some of us has tried to put a stop to because it was in the best interest of the association. We took beating, public beating, that this is a personal attack. Nevertheless, we plowed through it. And even today, the reason I am here is because people are asking me to be here and to stand by my beliefs.
Tom?
Dave?
My turn? Well, anybody who doesn't believe that chaos is going on only has to re-listen to what you just said. Anybody who believes there aren't personal attacks, there are at least 2 in your speech against the general manager and the interim general manager, and those have been a continuing process of your trying to get rid of the general manager. Your disagreements with the general manager have been open, and they have been carried to the employees. They've been carried to the employees. Issues that had nothing to do with the board were brought by you to employees. Now, I can say, and as a matter of fact, you know, I don't have to bring it up again because we already brought it up on the meeting on the 19th. And what we really decided on the 19th is, okay, enough of this stuff. I mean, that was the bottom line. All right, we won't go out to the press. We won't bring it in the press. We're trying to hire somebody. We won't bring this stuff out to the press. We won't approach employees. And we won't talk to employees. And yet, you, Slobodan, are the one who is, I mean, you're the first one to violate the agreement that we had. I mean, you were not reprimanded. There was nothing happened. That was appearing in the paper today. I mean, nothing happened because of our agreement that, look, let's just settle this down. Let's stop it. Let's not go to the press. Let's not talk to employees. Let's let this stuff settle down until we bring in a new general manager. And we want to bring in a new general manager where we all have happy faces. As I think Director Jacobs said, you mean we have to pretend? I said, yes, we do. As a matter of fact, it's a good thing to do. And here we are now. So you asked the question. We all know that there's one person who's, and I think you said this, we all know that there's one person who has created this chaos. Well, I think I almost agree with that, except that I don't think we agree on who it is, Slobodan. And I think, you know, many of us agree that it's you. That it's you. You have consistently hammered at the general manager since I don't know when, with things that had no foundation. And at any rate, I don't see how any of this is helping us. It's not helping the association. So I personally hope we can just call this question. And by the way, I would say, which would be maybe the only comment referring to the motion, is how do we get this person? Are we going to take the people that you've just put forward? Who is the HR consultant? No, there's no so we're going to hire an HR consultant. So when we already have one from Lurch Early, I called the question.
Yes. And Slobodan, I don't know why this is funny, because none of this is funny. This affects the lives of 8,000 homeowners and 300 employees. And you're right, there is one person responsible, because it has been 6 months that you've been after me. It's since you started back in January with antagonizing food and beverage. And I've held the high road on all of this. I've come in every day unpaid and done a job at the expense of my family and my career for the betterment of Ocean Pines. And you have constantly been on an attack for me. You've been on an attack for 3 years on a general manager. And I don't know how in the hell any general manager is going to come in here and succeed if you're involved in anything related to Ocean Pines. This is not a funny matter. Sitting there with that smirk on your face and laughing about half the shit in this meeting today is absolute bullshit. This is ridiculous. I haven't been the one going to the paper every week. I've been sitting here doing the best I can for the association while two people constantly undermine everything that this association is about. It is absolutely disgusting. And the reason that we need to keep the HR at a law firm is to handle the board itself on top of the employees. And we do have very serious problems right now, and they're instigated by board members. When a board member calls and offers to write a complaint because you need to unseat me and get me out of power to try and turn the election, this isn't about politics. This is about a business, and this is about the money of 8,452 people here that pay dues every year, and it is very serious. I cannot fathom how you think this is a laughing matter, and this is not personal. This is about a lot of other people. It's not about you and me. And I am not the one running to the papers and running everywhere else trying to create havoc. I don't want to be here. I wanted to do this. I accepted to do it for 30 to 60 days, and this has dragged on way too long. And the fact that a board can't support me, I don't know how the hell we're going to get somebody to do a job here. It's disgusting.
Let's put this to rest. Very simple. Why don't you consent, along with Mary Bozak, to show the video of the two of you and what you said in that video? And that's going to put everything to rest once and for all, so people will know exactly what transpired and why we are faced with what we've been faced with. That's all you got to do. All of these statements, this beautiful, passionate, desperate commitments, that all sounds great. I can make the same speech, but the facts are the facts. So
We discussed already. We already discussed that. And there were very good, solid reasons not to do it. There are very good, solid legal reasons not to do it. I mean, in fact, yes, I did refuse to look at that because I believe the video was obtained and was distributed illegally. And we had the support of our lawyer from that. And you go back to that video, and the only thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to say, well, Brett did bad things. But that has nothing to do with running the damn association from here on out. It has nothing to do with this motion on the table. Nothing. We have an acceptable, what I believe is an acceptable solution. If the majority of the board does not think it's an acceptable solution, and if what you have in this actually can result in something, then let's vote on it.
With regard to the actual motion that's on the floor, I had requested some time ago how much the attorney's fees for having an HR consultant on site is costing the association. I have yet to have that information. I asked for it back on the 3rd in an email, and I would think that several days is more than adequate to have that information. I'm puzzled as to why that information isn't available, and I think it's relevant to a decision on whether or not to continue moving forward with Mr. Neary as the HR consultant versus having someone else as an HR consultant. Dave, your point is well taken. If we move to choose someone else, yes, it will introduce some level of delay. However, I would also offer that if we moved to using someone else, that someone else can also be the bridge individual to move from the current environment and help guide and advise the new general manager when he or she creates that new position. So I think we can certainly get. I'm a little uncomfortable with everyone's tone. You guys have said to a person, I'm usually the one that tends to be the peacekeeper, the one that has to be kind of, the level-headed one. I think I thank you for that. Certainly, all of the positions, no one's right, no one's wrong. We have a set of circumstances here that need to be addressed. But I think we need commitment. And in some cases, I don't see it. Now, this is going to sound almost hypocritical, but Dave, we referred to the meeting on the 19th where we had several discussions about what we should and should not do. And I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that we didn't want to do any additional staff changes, hirings, firings, and the likes, all right? And given that that's what we decided, there's been some recent changes in staff, and I sent a message to everybody here on the board saying, please help me understand with these recent changes in staff, how that is in alignment with what we agreed to on the 19th.
Question, Doug, does that have anything to do with HR, though, those changes we're talking about?
Yeah, it does.
How?
It does. Because at some point, you've got a potential to where someone could generate a complaint based on a staff move, all right? Remember, we've got a somewhat volatile situation right now. So someone could perceive that if person X is favored, promoted, moved, removed, whatever, they could, in essence, bring up some issue. I am in risk avoidance. I want to make sure that we don't have that. The whole reason we have an HR individual is to try and prevent for lack of a better term, preventable situations where something might come up. Hey, if we've got an HR person, we've got a legal stand to put on, we've got a process, and we couldn't just dismiss their claims as irrelevant. So again, it's part of the protection environment. So yes, it is relevant. And, again, it goes back to, we're talking about an HR person. I think it's an important decision. I'm not against leaving Lurch or Mr. Neely from Lurch Early in place, because I think there's some continuity there. But if it's at a premium, and we have an option to look at a less costly solution, I think it's incumbent on us to do so.
Doug, you say a temporary position, whether it's temporary or full position, it's a position, and I don't think we have that role established. I don't think the board has set the parameters, whether that person's here for 2 months, 3 months, or 5 years. You still have to define that role. You're going to bring a person in, we don't know, we haven't decided as a board exactly what the duties and the role and responsibility is. We have something in place right now, someone can reach out to, someone that will be here when needed, and to get us to the next transition to the new GM, it's a perfect solution in my eyes. And we don't know who else to bring in. We don't have the role defined. And we're certainly not going to bring in someone because it's an acquaintance of one of the board members here that live in the community. I mean, it's too close. I want an independent person. It's the law firm right now. New GM's coming in. We're in a perfect position with HR. The best we can do right now.
Real quick, and I don't disagree. However, if we were to nitpick, you said we don't have a job description per se. I mean, certainly having Mr. Neary provide some level of service, do we have, a contractual agreement for the specific unit of work that he's been assigned to? Or is it covered under a more broad contractual agreement that we have with the law firm? Just a question. If it's already been covered, that's fine. However, if it hasn't been, I think we probably ought to go back and take a look at exactly what Mr. Neary should be providing us and make sure we state that explicitly so we're not, crossing any boundaries we shouldn't cross.
Well, then why don't we do that? Why don't we discuss Mr. Neary, find out exactly what he's doing? Maybe he's fulfilling the HR role that Slobodan has suggested or put forth in his motion, and move forward with Neary or a new HR person. The HR person is going to, as I said, going to have to be vetted, and certainly we don't want to go to just one person. So I'm not sure time-wise that's even going to work at this point. So maybe if we just understood Mr. Neary's qualifications and what his role is here today, or Monday, or Tuesday, then we could move forward, and actually Mr. Neary would fulfill Slobodan's motion.
I respectfully could I add cost to that as well, to what you just said? You talked about qualification and the cost of what it's doing.
Well, there's always another side to that equation.
I would like to think that you could relate to that,
Yeah,
Pat.
yeah. And if you get, the cheap guy's not always the best deal because you end up paying
Understood.
for it in the long run. Okay.
Ms. Jacobs?
There was a person suggested by Director Trendick. That person has been vetted, as I understand it, by the law firm, Mr. Neary, as well as another person who somehow got wind of this and came forward. Both of those people, as I understand it, from the law firm, have been vetted and have been deemed to be acceptable choices. I don't disagree at all that we have to have a defined role, but that is what we agreed to as a board, took a vote on it, and we were supposed to be moving in that direction. Instead, we had been directed, and I do mean that, we were directed that Mr. Neary in the law firm that represents the association, let's make sure we all understand who they represent as well, that was going to be providing the HR support. So if we're going in a different direction than what we had all voted on, then I think we probably need to revisit that. And I have to respond to what Mr. Hill intimated when he was talking about his situation. if you for one moment are accusing me of drafting a complaint for anybody, then you are dead wrong. I would never do that. And if somebody else drafted that for the person who filed that complaint, it certainly wasn't me.
I'll read the minutes from that. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
In the board packet from the September board meeting is the full proposal from Lurch Early that details the fees as well as the qualifications, which is the proposal that the board approved to move forward with HR and employment matters. It was the September of 2016 board meeting, and there was a proposal in there from all of the law firms that responded to the RFP that this board put out right after their first meeting. Mr. Neary's rates are billed at 1/10 of an hour. So while his rate is higher than perhaps a individual who would be billing as an independent consultant, our habits have seen that despite their rate, they're coming in lower than any resources we've used in the past because of the 1/10 of an hour billing, and they are only billing it for actual time work. There's no rounding, billing charges, driving charges, or the like added to that.
Again, I'll just refer the board to the minutes of the meeting on June 19th and HR support. The board will address this need immediately, which will also include an on-site HR support that will be available to the staff. The acting general manager was directed to do so, and that's what he did, exactly what it says here that we asked him to do in those minutes. In addition, I will share feedback from Mr. Tucker, our counsel, that he said both he and Mike Neary both have concerns about hiring an HR director who lives in Ocean Pines. So they just passed that on to us. Any further? Please read the motion itself before we vote.
I motion that the board approves immediate hiring of a local HR consultant, not employee, consultant, as a temporary on-site resource to the association's management and staff until such time when the new general manager is on board and able to make a more permanent HR support decision.
Call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 4-3. Mr. Parks, discussion, purchase of a,
This may not be the proper whatever, but I just want to, do we need to, I want to be sure that Neary is continuing in his role, or her role, whichever he is, or she, on site as an HR person, as in,
Yes, Lurch Early is continuing, and they will be continuing to provide an on-site representative as needed, and it's a on-demand. They're not sending someone to sit here, and we're not paying their hourly rate.
but does
Just, but as
do the
needed.
staff have the phone number?
Yes,
Has
that has
is
been
that out
provided to
there?
all staff, and as needed, a representative will be on-site to address any issues that would come up.
Mr. Parks?
Are we taking a break?
Okay. Recess, 5-minute break. call the meeting back to order. Mr. Parks?
Yeah, I move that the board at least have a discussion on a recommendation by the Aquatics Committee for the purchase of the Smart Mesh pool cover for the beach club. The expense on that was an additional $900, but it comes recommended based on the long-term strategy and use of that particular pool cover to protect that resource.
Can you inform us of the status on that cover? That was pre-approved by the board?
Yeah, you're bringing back up a capital purchase that was approved at the September 24th, 2016 meeting. And that purchase was supposed to have been made in the spring. We had made the approval at our meeting in September so that we knew that the work would be completed at the Beach Club pool prior to the pool opening. We requested it to be done in the fall if schedules would allow, and it didn't, but we made the beginning of the schedule with our contractor for the spring. So that job should have been closed out. It was a fiscal 16, or fiscal 17 budget, not fiscal 18. So I know the resurfacing was done. I'm not sure why the cover wasn't purchased, but it should have been already, and it should have been in last year's money.
So it's just
Well, no, I don't know why it was not completed by the staff. The staff was instructed on that based on the board's direction from last September. So I don't know why this is coming back now. It should have been done already.
Now, could we just formally ask that the GM follow up, and if it hasn't already been purchased, to go ahead and move forward with that purchase?
Doug, I think what's being asked is for us to purchase a different, more expensive cover than what we had originally approved. And so I think that's where this is. Am I wrong about that?
That's what it sounds like.
Yes, it's asking us to make a purchase of a more expensive cover that they feel is more appropriate. So right now, we're in a situation, if I understand it correctly, where money was allocated in the last budget that was not spent. And so this would be a new capital purchase at a $900 increase of what had been approved last year.
I just have a question about process here, and I have some concerns. Are we talking about an employee coming to you, Doug, or is this through committee?
Through committee.
Okay.
Well, first of all, clarification, and thank you. I think that, I believe, Cheryl, I think you're right, is that we had approved monies in the FY17 budget, and it hadn't been approved. And this is now, after reconsideration from the Aquatics Committee, they're making a recommendation that we move forward with the Smart Mesh cover, which in turn will be an additional $900 worth of expense in order to purchase that cover. So I guess if we're confirming that the purchase has not yet been made, and then I would ask the board for consideration in expending the additional $900 and having the GM move forward with the purchase of the Smart Mesh cover.
Is it in this year's budget?
No, because it was a project from last year that was supposed to be
And
completed
wouldn't it
last
be
year.
great if we had a rolling 3-year capital budget, a rolling 5-year capital budget? Wouldn't that be great if we just, took okay, we didn't. So it's an unbudgeted, what were the total dollars? Does anybody? That's additional. My understanding is that's additional.
Yeah, I have to, let me see if,
Is this supported by the Director of Aquatics as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Just think we should have a dollar amount before we go forward with any approval. A total dollar amount, especially since it's not in the
Could
budget.
you also request that she put that in writing to the board, requesting the director, aquatic director?
As liaison of that committee, I'll have her provide that information. I'll bring it back before the board with, the full amount of the purchase.
Okay.
at this point, I would think this should be rebid, because we're talking about quotes and a motion from a year ago. So, and the cover is not gonna go on now, so if it wasn't purchased and you're saying to hold the project should be revisited completely. There should be a new RFP, and we should get 3 quotes for this style of cover. I know the cover that was approved and the work that was approved was matching the Mumford's Landing facility, and that's the extent of what I have from my notes from that meeting a year ago. But if we're talking a new project, it should be just a new project.
Point of order, was anything done on that project at all, or it was just on the books with some funding, but it sort of languished and nothing was ever done? Was that the current status?
No, because we approved to the same vendor resurfacing the pool as well as supplying the pool cover. And the issue with the resurfacing was supposedly that we were not covering the pool and leaving the pool open through the winter, so elements were getting in. So the vendor recommended in resurfacing the pool that we apply a cover to it to keep the sand, leaves, and other stuff from going in. Because they didn't complete the resurfacing in the fall and it went to the spring, the pool was resurfaced, filled, and then the pumps were turned on for operation for this season. So we never had a cover put on, but to my knowledge, because it was one bid and one project, the entire project was done. That's where I'm at on it. But I'm guessing if
At the risk of splitting hairs, if a cover was included in the bid and it wasn't put on, I would call the project incomplete.
well, yes, but now we're talking changing a product and changing what we compared on and approved. So that's why, if the cover's being removed and it was partially billed, then we should close out the billing and leave, because that should have been done last year. If it's going to this year's fiscal, we should create a new project and just have a project on the cover.
Will that be the direction? Rebid it?
Accepted.
If it's in that dollar, I mean, I don't know, what kind of dollars are we talking about here? Is
I
it
don't know, because the
thousands?
two were
I mean, it
bundled.
could be thousands. You're right, it could be thousands.
Just a point of clarification, if this was a project that was approved, instead of going for a rebid, is it possible to do just a change order and not restart everything? Because it's not like we are rebidding everything, it's just a component within a project, which in this case is a pool. So change order to me would be maybe quicker.
Rather than debating it here ad nauseum, I will go back, I'll make the commitment to go back to the Aquatics Advisory Committee and get their recommendations and come with a little bit more detail on how best to move forward. Okay? Aquatics Director and the Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a motion for adjournment to closed session for contractual issues permitted by the Maryland Homeowners Association Act, Section 11B-111, Sub 4, meeting of the Board of Directors or other governing body of the Homeowners Association or committee of the Homeowners Association may be held in closed session for the following purposes: consultation with legal counsel on legal matters to include discussion relative to the operation of our aquatics facilities. Excuse me? Operation of the Ocean Pines Aquatics facilities.
I'll second.
Discussion.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to the motion to also include discussion on matters pertaining to employees and personnel. This is as a result of a couple of communications that the board, that were brought to the board's attention in the last couple of days.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion on the amendment? No discussion? Anyone in favor of the amendment, say aye. Any opposed? Motion, request approval and vote on the amended motion, original motion with the amendment. All in favor?